Hello, and welcome to another episode of AI in the Classroom Daily. This is a podcast helping educators make sense of AI without the hype. I'm Dan Cogan-Drew, co-founder, chief academic officer here at Newsella, and I use AI as a thinking partner in preparing each of these episodes because I think the best way to talk honestly about AI in education is to work with it openly. So today is part 2 of a 2-part series. Yesterday, we looked at Daniel Willingham's research on student attention in part 1. The headline was counterintuitive. Digital devices haven't destroyed students' capacity to focus, but they have changed what students are willing to tolerate. Through delay discounting, that is, preferring immediate rewards, and boredom calculations, which is comparing current tasks to available alternatives, students are making rational choices about where they direct their attention, and those choices are influenced by what other options are available and how those options feel. Today, in part 2, I want to explore what happens when those competing options aren't external distractions on a phone. What happens when the competitor to classroom learning is a tool that offers an alternative way to learn? So the question I'm asking here is, does regular use of AI train students in ways that make classroom learning feel less attractive? Not less engaging in the superficial sense, but less attractive as a mechanism for understanding something. Willingham doesn't talk about AI specifically. His research is about phones and screens, but his framework, delay discounting and boredom calculations, I think gives us a way to think about what might happen if students get used to learning with AI. So I'm going to start by describing what AI offers compared to what classroom learning typically offers. With AI, you ask a question and you get an answer right away. There's no delay, and you don't have to sit with any of the uncertainty while you wait for a response. There's also no back and forth negotiation about what you understand and what you don't. For the most part, the AI is not pushing back. It's not saying, try this first or you're not ready for that. It's answering with speed, confidence, and volume. Contrast that with classroom learning, which is often the opposite. You ask a question, and the teacher asks you another question instead of answering. And their response may be slow. It may be uncertain. They might say, I'm not sure, but we're going to figure this out together. The dialogue is not a free-flowing volume of words. It can be halting as the teacher is thinking out loud about what the right answer is to the question. In a conversation with your teacher, there's a back and forth. It might be that one person says something, another person responds. There could be silences and pauses while everyone's thinking. The answer might be incomplete. It might change as the conversation continues. All of this is to say, if you've ever taught in a classroom, if you've ever been in a classroom, you know that it's messy. Willingham's framework suggests something worth thinking about. Students who are becoming used to AI's way of delivering information, again, immediate, confident, and voluminous, might find themselves comparing classroom dialogue to that experience. And if they're doing the boredom calculation that Willingham describes, they might find classroom learning boring by comparison. It's not because there's anything wrong with classroom learning. If that's the case, it would be because they've practiced getting used to a different standard. There is some data here that matters. This isn't entirely theoretical. For example, back in June, Common Sense Media published a survey of students describing how they use AI outside of school. 89% of more than 1,000 students surveyed used it for entertainment or just for fun. 75% used it to create things, such as images, videos, stories, music. They were also using it for advice. 49% asked it about decisions about their future or their goals. 40% used it to practice conversations or social skills. 37% used it to discuss their feelings or personal problems. And more than half used it to get information about their own health or their body. So if we imagine going back to school this fall, and students have spent the summer training themselves, in a sense, to rely on AI for answers when human interaction felt uncomfortable, slow, uncertain, they learned that AI is available 24/7. There's no delay. It doesn't tell you to try harder or to think more. It just gives you answers. So now they come back to school. They're in classrooms where teachers are asking them to engage in the kinds of learning that require a tolerance for uncertainty, for slowness, bunch of back and forth dialogue that doesn't resolve neatly. For students who've been using AI heavily, that classroom experience might feel worse, not because they've lost the ability to concentrate, but because they're comparing it to something that feels more immediately rewarding. Now, to be clear, this is speculative. We don't have research showing that this is happening systematically, but Willingham's framework suggests it's something we should be paying attention to. So if we're paying attention, what might it look like if we notice this? For example, a student might reach for AI before attempting a task on their own. They might get impatient with open-ended questions. They might either say, just tell me the answer, or they might behave in a way that shows they're impatient with the fact that they haven't gotten the answer. They might show a preference for tasks where AI can participate or assist, where the structure allows them to offload over tasks that require genuine dialogue and back and forth thinking. They might be less willing to sit with some confusion, and when confusion appears, instead of leaning into that as a signal that learning is happening, they might think, what a waste of time. I could just use AI to get the answer. They might make cognitive offloading decisions like, I could do this, but why would I when the AI can? This isn't necessarily out of laziness, but because they're making a calculation, a rational decision here. This task requires slow, uncertain dialogue. The AI offers faster, more certain answers. Which do I prefer? I think this connects to research we've talked about before in this show around cognitive surrender. But Willingham's framework gives us a mechanism for understanding why it might be happening. It's not that students are intellectually lazy or that they lack self-discipline. It's that AI has changed their expectations about what learning should feel and sound like. And when classroom learning doesn't match those expectations, they make a rational choice. This is different from the question of whether AI tutoring platforms are actually improving learning. The Stanford research we covered a few weeks ago found that most students barely used AI tutors, even when they were given dedicated time and human support. So this isn't about AI as a tutoring tool in the traditional sense. This is more about students who are using AI regularly outside of school structures and what that regular use begins to train them to expect. It's about the boredom calculation that happens when you're comparing a classroom conversation about a difficult concept to an AI prompt that returns a polished answer in seconds. So if I'm a teacher, what might I do if I notice this? To be clear, this is speculative. We're not at the point of having evidence-based practices here, but Willingham's research does suggest some directions. One is to make the value of struggle and uncertainty explicit. It sounds simple, but it's not intuitive for students who've learned to see struggle as a reason to switch tasks. If a student gets confused, the classroom move might be to say, not in a condescending way, but genuinely, this confusion is where learning happens. You're about to understand something you didn't understand before, and that's why it feels hard. That makes the uncomfortable parts of learning visible as features rather than bugs. Another direction is to design tasks where offloading breaks the assignment itself. It's not you're not allowed to use AI, but if you use AI here, you've changed what we're working on. This assignment asks you to think, but not used AI to think. The difference is subtle but important. One is a rule you're enforcing, and the other is a design feature that students encounter. This concept goes all the way back to one of our earliest episodes from Tony Frontier's book, AI with Intention, in which Frontier talks about the idea of maintaining alignment between the assignment and the learning outcome so that the learner's energy maintains alignment with the expected outcome. This can be thrown off when AI is used to solve part of the assignment that the student didn't realize was actually on the direct path to learning. A third direction is to create consistent context where students know that AI isn't an option. This isn't meant as a punishment, but as a structure that lets their brains learn something different. Willingham mentions this in the context of phones, but I think it applies here too. If there's a reliable context where AI isn't available, a class period, a type of assignment, students' brains will adjust their boredom calculations. The availability of the technology is what's throwing everything up in the air. Absent the technology, students will stop comparing classroom work to what I could be doing with AI because they've learned that in this context, it's simply not an option. This learning is going to take time, but it's possible. Maybe the most direct move that you could make would be to ask students about it. When you notice a student reaching for AI or showing less willingness to engage with difficult open-ended work, you can ask them directly. When did you decide to use the AI? What were you hoping it would do? What would happen if you tried without it? Those questions might surface whether they're making a genuine choice based on their learning needs or whether they're making a choice based on comparison and boredom calculations. So I want to emphasize here, we don't know if this is happening at scale. This is a hypothesis I'm suggesting that's based on Willingham's framework and some real data about how students use AI outside of school. But as you head into the school year, this is something that I would suggest is worth paying attention to. It's not evidence of a problem that's already solved, but it's a pattern that you might notice. I think the real question here is, are your students choosing to use AI over classroom learning? And if they are, what's driving the choice? Is it that they need support that they're not getting? Is it that the classroom learning feels slow compared to what they practiced with AI? Is it both? Neither? Something else? This is what I would love to know from you, because these are obviously different problems with different solutions, and answering which one you're actually facing starts with noticing what students are choosing and asking why. So as you've seen this in the past year, I would love to know how what I'm proposing here resonates. Is it the availability of AI that may cause students to demonstrate a decrease in what you've been thinking of, or what's been termed resilience, but is in fact a calculated, rational decision that there's something else they would rather do with their time and they have a better alternative? And if you remove that alternative, what is the result? As always, thanks for spending time with us today on AI in the Classroom Daily, and we will see you again tomorrow.